Number 3, discussion with the county administrator hiring committee. So we have we did meet today, and we do have citizen member Randy Eggenberger, who is also on the Government Study Commission, who will be doing a presentation today.
Okay, great.
Right, yep, if you want to come on up and state your name for the
Mr.
record.
Chair, before you start that, would you please name the names of the hiring committee that sat in on this?
You don't remember from when we voted on that?
I would like you to state who, we're talking about a different decision. Would you just please name them?
So it's Deb Koenig, Judy Barton, Randy Eggenberger, myself, and Gail Gillespie.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Randy.
I'm Randy Eggenberger. I am a member of the Administrator Search Committee, and I was also a member of the Government Study Commission. I'm a lifelong resident of Wabasha County. I'm the owner of Wild Wings in Lake City. We employ 65 people in this county. I'd like to read the rationale the planning committee has used in arriving at this. The original Administrator Search Committee convened last spring. One of our biggest concerns was whether we could realistically attract an experienced qualified candidate given the unflattering publicity surrounding Wabasha County and the severe polarization of the board. It was no secret that the board was divided 3-2 on many issues, foremost among them being whether the county should deploy an administrator or coordinator form of government. By that time, the administrator form had been reinstated, and its legality has since been affirmed by the Minnesota Court of Appeals. Even so, with new elections on the horizon this fall, it was anybody's guess as to what the future would hold. We were very concerned that the unstable political environment would work against us in attracting a qualified candidate. Despite those misgivings, the search committee decided to pursue a permanent hire and engaged a search firm to that end. We were satisfied with the results, which yielded a couple of good prospects. With the help of others, including board members, we eventually settled on recommending Larry Timmerman, a seemingly bright, energetic consensus builder with an extremely positive personality. We believe that Mr. Timmerman had the interpersonal and diplomatic skills necessary to bridge the ideological differences that existed on the board. Unfortunately, as we all know, it took a mere 2 months on the job to break Mr. Timmerman's can-do spirit. His resignation came as a huge disappointment to all of us. The committee had clearly underestimated the human toll of nonstop acrimony and dysfunction at the board level. And so the county now finds itself back at square one with an election involving 3 of 5 seats looming in November. All of the search committee's original concerns still apply and indeed have only increased with the passage of time. Add to that the negative publicity that surrounded Mr. Timmerman's departure, and you really have the deck stacked against a successful search for a permanent hire. Given that reality, the committee decided not to risk the same outcome this time around. Instead, we decided to recommend an interim hire, effectively delaying the permanent decision until after the election. Our attention then turned to identifying the ideal qualifications of an interim administrator. We obviously needed relevant experience in county governance, including legal issues, contract negotiations, and the like. We needed experience in human resources, a key qualification cited by the Government Study Commission. Ideally, we needed someone with strong personal ties to Wabasha County and a good network of community partners. We needed someone who was keenly aware of, shall we say, the unusual personality challenges at the board level. And perhaps most importantly, we needed someone with thick skin. Michael Plante is all of those things. He is well versed on issues of county governance, including the unique circumstances of Wabasha County. He is an attorney with an excellent understanding of human resource law and management. He is bright, energetic, level-headed, and highly respected by county staff. He is available with minimal delay at a good value to the county and 100% ready to hit the ground running. And most importantly, he is willing to accept the challenges of this highly contentious, highly visible position. Additionally, Michael is available to us with no search or relocation expense. He will be able to maintain what remains of management continuity thanks to his good working relationships with county staff. Eventually, it will be up to the board to decide whether to make this position permanent. The only thing Michael asks in return for the uncertainty is an assurance that if the board decides to part ways with him as administrator, he will be offered another position of equal grade to his current position. In our view, that is a small price to pay for the benefits that Michael will bring. And so, on behalf of the Administrator Search Committee, we hereby recommend that Wabasha County name Michael Plante as interim county administrator, effective as soon as practical. Thank you.
Thanks. I guess at this point, we'll move forward with the approval, number 4, the approval of hiring an interim county administrator. Once we get a first and a second, we'll then have time to discuss the topic. Do we have a motion to approve the hiring of the interim county administrator, Michael Plante?
You do, Mr. Chair.
We got a motion by Commissioner Wabi. Do we have a second? I'll second that. So here's our time for discussion. Any discussion with this board?
Go first. That's
Okay.
it.
I called Mr. Plante yesterday, and I had a couple questions for him, which he answered for me on the phone. One of the things that concerns me a little bit is statutorily, it says that an administrator should be trained in administration, have a degree in administration. I talked to Mr. Plante, and he told me that he had, from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a degree in pre-law. And I understand that some of the issues that Mr. Eggenberger read into the record will to some degree cover that. But it still concerns me that the guidelines that we set up through the hiring committee right now, for some reason, are not being seriously, in my opinion, looked at.
Is that the only issue? Is that piece of it?
That's one piece of it.
Okay.
The other piece of it is Judy Barton has served as an interim administrator before. Was she offered a contract?
She was not interested.
Okay. When she served before, was she offered a contract?
No.
Okay. And Terry Smith has served as an interim administrator before. Was he offered a contract?
I think back when we made those appointments, Dave, there was a time where we didn't realize, or laws have changed now, that at that time, when you appoint an administrator, they have to resign their position. And we never made those two individuals do that. And in this instance, Michael will have to, and we've looked at those variables. The hiring committee has looked at multiple variables, and we're at this point today. So, they had assurances that when their administrator position was done, they went back to their positions, because essentially they were still doing their positions. This is different. This is a little different animal, Dave. But we did look at those issues, and we thoroughly discussed them at the hiring committee level.
Commissioner Springer, may I address this issue?
Yep.
Just to try to keep the board on
Can
point.
you
I know
state
that-
your name?
Sure,
just for
Michael
the record?
Plante, Assistant Wabasha County Attorney, and also the candidate for appointment here for interim county administrator.
Thank you.
I just want to keep the board, or keep it clear that we're looking at moving forward. I know that there have been things in the past, but ultimately you can't change what's already happened. If that's how those appointments happened in the past, so be it. I'm looking at the here and now, and the contract is something that I would need to move forward in this position. Number one, because we've talked about, and it's been mentioned, that for the past few years, there's been a lot of turmoil here. We've talked about experience, we've talked about other issues. Wabasha County has had the benefit of having an administrator that has had over 30 years of experience. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to solve the divide. Wabasha County also looked at hiring an interim administrator by the name of Bob Darris. We came very close to hiring him. He had a lot of experience. Ultimately, he felt that he would not be able to help this county board. We've had we've had coordinators, we've had another administrator even in between there that have had certain training experience, and that didn't work. So if the question is simply about experience, I don't necessarily think that should be the board's concern. It should be about who can get the job done. And we've seen that experience hasn't been the answer. What I frankly believe to be the answer is who understands what is going on in Wabasha County. You can bring in any number of people down here who can read the newspapers and think that they have a good grasp of what's going on here. But I think if you ask any county citizen or county employee what's going on, they would even give you a different picture of what's being reported on. It's hard to know what you're dealing with until you're actually here. To touch on the second issue that Commissioner Harms brought up, he seemed to allude that statute 375 requires a degree in public administration. That's simply not the case. It states that the decision should be made based on training and experience and administrative qualifications. When you look at the training that's outlined or requested in our position profile for what I would stress is the permanent county administrator, not the interim county administrator, it asks for a knowledge of personal management principles and practices and experience in staff development and performance evaluation. Boiled down, that's HR issues. I can tell you that in law school, one of the very first things that you work on are issues related to employment law and other issues that would come into play, such as contract negotiation and discipline, those issues. Also, it asks for experience in union negotiations. I can tell you that in the last 6 years, over the last 3 years, we've had 2 different sets of union negotiations. We're involved in one of them right now. I was involved in the first set of negotiations that produced the contracts that we're currently operating under. And I'm also, as the board is well aware, since we're right in the thrust of it, involved in those as well, and we'll even be discussing that later on today. One of the other requirements that it asks for is highly skilled and effective at oral and written communication. Well, like it or not, that's basically what attorneys do on a daily basis. We address the court on a daily basis. We address the county board on a daily, well, maybe not a daily basis, but a routine basis with memos. We interact with department heads. We interact with other county staff. We are fielding questions on a daily basis. So I can't see that being a lacking. And then the last requirement in our own profile is the knowledge of Minnesota laws governing county administrator form of government. I'd like to come up here and tell you that I didn't have that knowledge, but as the county board is well aware, this has been an issue for the last 3 years that our county board, our county attorney's office has worked on. So I feel that I have a great knowledge base there. Getting back to the statutory requirements, I can't think of a better training ground than law school than to get ready for this position, because law school, all the classes you're taking relate to how helping the public in a lot of ways, whether it's county citizens or what state or local actors can do, what local municipalities can do, and that's ingrained into you for 3 years. It's not a very fun process, but you certainly get a lot out of it. As far as actual experience, I'm the only candidate that you have in front of you or that has applied for these positions that has real-world experience right here in Wabasha County. As I mentioned, this county has had a lot of applicants for the initial permanent position. We hired one that even I would state was a very good candidate. If all he had to do was work as a county administrator, he probably would have been successful. Unfortunately, and this is just my opinion, I don't have anything to back it up from Mr. Timmerman or anybody else, I don't think he was prepared for the divisiveness that is in front of Wabasha County. And unfortunately, I think that led to him leaving the position. I'm going to stress again, that's just my position. As I mentioned, I've been here for just about 4 years, fairly close to that. The last few years have been tough. All the county staff know what's going on here. I feel that during that time I have certainly bonded with a number of those individuals and have gained their trust. I can tell you that I was contacted by a strong majority of department heads prior to this meeting. At least outwardly they're expressing to me that they support this appointment. Whether or not they would do that publicly might be another issue. I'm not sure about that, but I feel very confident in the ties that I've built around this community as well. A lot of the individuals that you see out here, I've worked with on a number of capacities, whether it be at their local level, whether it be at the city, or whether it be with citizen groups. I think in the packet in front of you, you see a very diverse group of individuals. You have individuals that work for small cities such as Hammond. You have individuals that have worked for the cities such as Lake City. You also have people that are here that support it from Wabasha. There's a very diverse range of individuals in there. And I think what that shows you is I've taken time outside of just working in the county attorney's office to really bridge a gap that I saw lacking between the county and the local governments. And I think that's something that you need to take into consideration, because even if you brought somebody else in here, it takes a lot of time to build those connections. It's something that I take a lot of pride in. Over the last 4 years that I've been here, I've tried to reach out as much as I can to get that local support and to get to know everybody else. As far as administrative qualifications, this isn't a criticism of the county board or any of the county staff, but when the county board decided to do away with the county administrator Dave Johnson, I don't have the exact date, December of 2011, I believe. Like it or not, a lot of those requirements fell to county staff. I can tell you that Ms. Koenig has done a yeoman's job. She's worked very hard, but a lot of those responsibilities have also fallen to other individuals like Denise and also to the county attorney's office. In a lot of ways, we've been acting as de facto administrators since that time, whether it's going through employee discipline issues that we've had at this county, whether it's been going through hiring issues at this county, whether it's going through internal issues, questions, how should we run things in the county. Those have, by and large, fallen to the county attorney's office, and by and large have fallen to me. That's not to toot my own horn or anything like that, it's just to put it out there. That I feel that the county board is well within its rights to appoint me as an interim county administrator if it would like to. I'm also willing to tell you that if the county board does not want to do that, I'm very happy to work in the county attorney's office. I've been very fortunate to work with two county attorneys, or an assistant county attorney and a county attorney that have an amazing amount of experience. I've learned a lot from them. I value them both as friends and mentors. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you guys did not offer me this job. I'd be very happy to go back and work with those individuals. But now saying that, I do believe I have the thick skin that's required to do this. I'm not going to shy away from any of the criticism or attention, be it deserved or otherwise, that comes with that position. And I think what the board also has to understand is that I'm not going anywhere. I'm committed to staying here. I've got a family that I intend to raise here. And ultimately, if the board wanted to make it a permanent decision in the future, that's something we can cross at that time. But I can tell the board that I'm committed to working with each and every one of you, even if we might have a history that isn't as rosy as we'd like. But I'm coming here with a clean slate. I'm more than willing to give every one of you a clean slate as well.
Thank you. Further discussion, Deb, did you have?
Yeah, just some questions.
Absolutely.
In your course of life, I guess, how many people have you supervised?
I would say 186. That's how many we have for Wabasha County. I wouldn't say that I necessarily am their direct supervisor, but without a county administrator, majority of the questions that come up, like it or not, end up going to the county attorney's office. That's not to say that I don't get a lot of help from people like Denise Anderson, Deb Koenig, or those individuals that have been in Wabasha County for a number of years. I'm not going to come in here and tell you that I have all the answers, but I feel very confident with the fact, and I probably wouldn't be willing to take this position if Wabasha County didn't have great department heads and other staff in place to help me. And the reason why I say that is because there are going to be areas that I'm lacking in experience, and I'm hopeful that I can gain that experience. I can think of budgeting as one issue, and fortunately we have a very good finance director. But for that direct question, I'd say over the last 2 years it's been 186.
Then, then tell us how your experiences and so forth have helped you with staff development and performance evaluation of those 186 people.
Absolutely. During that time, I can say that I'm very fortunate. I feel that I've built a very good rapport with a number of these individuals. It's hard to build trust in an environment such as this, and that's just my opinion. And I think that I've been able to do that. I think if you bring somebody else into this position, it takes a long time to build that trust. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if the county workforce is ready for that. And what I mean by that is one of the overarching concerns that I've heard a number of times is, we're going to bring in another administrator. This will be our 5th or 6th administrator in 3 years, and I'm getting tired of trying to learn and work with those individuals when they just might be a revolving door. So I think that I bring that as a benefit.
But, I mean, personal hands-on staff development and performance evaluations, that's what I'm getting at. I know Larry was working on, when he left, developing personnel evaluations, things like that. What is your experience with hands-on, sitting down one-on-one, coaching, mentoring, building a subordinate?
Yep. We've done that before in Wabasha County. I'm not going to necessarily get into specifics, but when department heads have an issue with whether it be an employee or how to handle HR issues, they certainly get us involved in that. We've certainly sat down with individual department heads and also county employees and have laid out plans and expectations.
When you say we, are you talking about we as in your department, or we as you personally?
We as me personally, the department head, the individual, if that's someone that's involved, if there has to be somebody else in the county attorney's office, we've had that as well.
So, I know, I can understand how you arrived at the conclusion that you supervise 186 people. I don't know if supervise is maybe the word I would use, because supervise to me talks about that they're a direct report to you, so that, you know, in essence, you're responsible for their day-to-day responsibilities, functions, performance, things like that. And I think, you know, even you would have to admit, it's pretty impossible to be a direct supervisor to 186 people. If that were the case, we don't need department heads, we just need one person. I mean, it just won't work, because you have to have that one-on-one relationship with your subordinate, where you're, you know, you're sitting down and having those, you know, quarterly, biannual, whatever, monthly coaching and evaluation performance sessions. So that's kind of what I'm trying to lead to, is what is your experience with a, you know, sitting down with somebody who directly reports to you and say, you know, here's what's working well in our relationship, in your role, whatever. Here's what's not working very well. And developing a performance improvement plan, those types of things. What is your personal experience, you know, hands-on? I know high level, you know, they pick up the phone and say, you know, let me brush something off of you. I'm sure department heads do that on a fairly regular basis. But to be in another office and give advice that way, being the person across the table, it's a different situation. You necessarily aren't dealing with that relationship, that trust, those types of things. So I'd like to hear about your experience in that regard.
My answer is not changing, Commissioner Rush. As the county board is aware, once the county administrator is abolished, all those duties and responsibilities are spread out to various county department staff. Unfortunately, a lot of those responsibilities have come to our office. If you're asking for when I've sat down individually with employees and department heads and not just over the phone, I think I answered that. We've done it on a number of occasions in the past. We have experience with doing that. I personally have experience with doing that. So I understand what your concern is, but I just want to point out that I believe that I've answered that question. And ultimately, that was a decision that the county board chose to make. Unfortunately, they didn't give a whole lot of clarification on who was supposed to assume what duties. So a lot of those performance and other evaluations fell to our county attorney's office. And I believe we've done an admirable job.
Two things. Number one, in our board packet, we were not provided any performance evaluations of Michael to review. So I'd like a copy of those. I don't know if you get those, because I need Laura.
I don't have to do some checking to see if that is something that is available to the public or not.
Typically, when you do an internal promotion, an internal shift, that's some of the qualifications and criteria. Typically, a poor performer, and I'm not insinuating you are, but we have to confirm I don't know that you're not either, because I haven't seen your performance evaluations. And Judy's shaking her head. When you promote somebody, you promote a good performer. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not going to promote a non.
Right, so that's where I'm going. We as commissioners would in essence be Michael's managers, basically. I mean, I guess you.
I'll share my performance reviews with anybody, including the public. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, good. And then.
But I will have to ask you that you put that in writing for our data request to me, please. Because I need to have the record of that.
Michael, have you ever participated in any fundamentals of management training, anything?
Oh, when you're in law school, you do a lot of HR-related classes, whether it be employment law, contract drafting, and also through going through CLEs. I've taken some continuing legal education that is specifically related to civil issues, related to employee discipline and employee training. I wouldn't want to necessarily say training, but employee and HR issues that are prevalent both in county businesses or government agencies and also private agencies, so yes. And that's not something I'm opposed to. I'm not going to come here and tell you that I have every answer. I'm not going to be the one who tells you that I am the HR king, because I'm not. That's why a lot of organizations have professional HR individuals. But what I can tell the board, if there are areas that I'm lacking, just like we've done with past county administrators or coordinators, I'm more than willing to go with it and find some additional training. And I'm more than willing to listen to county board guidance on that. If there are specific areas that you feel that I'm lacking on, I might be, and that's fine. But I can tell you that I'm also willing to work on addressing those areas for you.
So can we get also, you talked about the classes and the training and things that you've already had. Again, we're not provided any of that information. All we got was the resolution and the contract, basically. I would like a data request also to have, your transcript maybe, or your resume.
Those aren't things that the county maintains, creates, or collects, so even if you did a data request, that wouldn't be there. Ultimately, are these the same requests that you make of county employees that apply here?
Yeah.
I don't think so. You ask for them to represent that on a piece of paper. There's never been a verification process. Now saying that if I can find records of classes that I've taken, I will gladly provide those.
Well, I'm talking, I think we were talking about two different things. I'm talking about if you were, if I didn't know you, what would you provide me that I would want to offer you a position? Well, you provide me a resume. You provide me your education, your curriculum vitae, where you volunteered, where you've worked, the types of experience, have you supervised people, additional training, management training, those types of things that, when you're trying to rise above the rest and say I'm the best person for the job, you provide those information. And I know you're an assistant county attorney, but that's all I know about Michael Plante. I don't know, I don't know if you got good grades in school. I don't know if you were at the top of your class. Those are all things you look at when you're hiring somebody, and references. And I know that we've got a lot of people who really like you. And I like you. I think you're a nice person, but that doesn't necessarily qualify. Nice people don't always qualify for every job just because they're nice, and you understand that.
I do, and certainly, as we addressed the board last Tuesday, if there are any other questions or concerns that individuals had on this hiring process, I'd have been more than willing to try to provide those had I been given any kind of advance notice. Commissioner Harms, as he mentioned yesterday, or today, contacted me about trying to figure out what kind of legal degree I graduated with, and I came prepared to show that I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2006 with a Bachelor of Arts in Legal Studies. If you had specific concerns that you would have raised before today, I certainly would have tried to address those for you.
Well, and in all fairness to the, last week when this was brought up, Dave and I right away started to ask questions, and we were told, we'll discuss it all next week at the meeting. And so I was under the assumption that today was the appropriate time to ask questions.
We've been going through this for about 2 years, and I know that when we had the last round of applicants that we brought in through Bryn Fursman, I'm not sure if any of these requests were made of them, so I'm not sure if there's a specific concern about me personally, or if it's that maybe that there were some flaws in the past as well, and you're just trying to address them.
I guess my opinion on that, or my position is, in the past, we had hired them to do that for us, to review resumes, check references. That's why we paid them $18,000. So it was not our responsibility. Now we don't have them doing that, running interference basically for us, or dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So I feel the responsibility has more or less shifted back to the board to make sure that, we are in fact covering our bases, just like Richard would do if he were here.
I think that's a great segue, because I did contact Richard yesterday, and I know that Commissioner Harms and Commissioner Rushing and Commissioner Springer also contacted Mr. Fursman. In fact, he was very supportive of the hire. He thought that I'd do a great job of it. He expressed some of the concerns that I stated right to this county board, that there are some areas that I probably don't have all of the experience in, and unfortunately, I don't think you can get anybody who's perfect for any one position. Everybody's going to have to do training, but I can tell you from speaking with Mr. Fursman, unless he was just saying it to say it, but he was very supportive of the hire, and I'm assuming if you guys asked him the same questions, he would stand by that.
And then also, Deb, I clarified last meeting too, that if you had concerns, that they should come to me so that we could address them in the hiring committee meeting that we had this morning, and I hadn't received any response from anyone actually on the board. So I just assumed that most of the questions were answered, but they're not. I see.
Yeah, I was able to get to this stuff Sunday a little bit more so, but yesterday afternoon and last night when I got home from work. And even this morning, as you can see, I'm jotting notes on scratch paper as I'm getting ready.
Well, just to be clear, I don't mind the questions. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. I think it's important, and you would agree, it's important that everybody, that we feel we've vetted you, and that you feel, that you're here because you deserve it. I mean, you'd want that. So then, I asked Richard for this, and you have that too. And what this is that you all don't know, but when the hiring committee decided to seek to work with Richard and his firm, they put together a nice brochure marketing Wabasha County and also marketing what kind of candidates. And so what was identified at that point was that the background and experience for this position is very important. And it says the candidate for county administrator position should possess a bachelor's degree in public administration, business administration, or a related field, and at least 8 years related city or county administrative experience or equivalent combination of education experience may be acceptable. And some of the things that Michael has already said, knowledge of personnel management principles and practices, experience in union, leadership qualities. The hiring committee had identified with the help of Richard. The desired new administrator will be a strong visionary leader who is a person of highest integrity. This person would be respectful. This person would be politically savvy without being political. Some priorities, that this person would be able to establish trust and an excellent working relationship with the board. So as those kind of as our backdrop, can you give us examples of how you have demonstrated the highest integrity?
I think you guys wouldn't have kept me as a county attorney or assistant county attorney if I didn't treat people in a respectful manner, if I wasn't getting my work done. Ultimately, that is incumbent on the county board. You guys are part of my bosses. I've been working here for 3 years, and if you would have had issues on these areas, I assume that they would have been raised by now. And I'm not aware of any of those necessarily being addressed.
And I can tell you on behalf of the county attorney's office, there's never been an issue with Michael's integrity.
You know, and just looking through these, I touched on most of those. The knowledge in personnel management, experience in union negotiations, effective oral written communications, understands rural small city living, knowledge of Minnesota laws and governing county administrator. I believe, and it's ultimately the county board that gets to make that decision, but I believe I have all those qualifications, these spades.
And that was written for a permanent administrator position as well. So this is an interim position that we're looking at today. So, you know, did we have time to rewrite that maybe to make this more attractive to an internal candidate? You know, there's just certain, you know, we're tasked with it to do the duty without costing the taxpayers much money, and we didn't charge them, you know, it didn't cost them anything. And so I think, you know, these ultimately are, you know, what we'd like to see, but, you know, if something doesn't quite meet the letter, that's why it does say should.
And just to go through those leadership qualities, be direct in demonstrating excellent communication skills. I think I do that on a daily basis. I think if you ask anybody that is in this audience who supports me, or I think if you contact anybody who wrote you a letter, they would tell you that that is probably who I am to a fault. Being self-confident without being arrogant, maybe sometimes I cross that line, I apologize.
Can I answer that?
Be a respectful and approachable leader who listens carefully and thoughtfully. I really appreciate what Gene and others had to say about me, but that really made me feel good, because that is something I try to do. When I know that there's an issue that's coming in front of the county board, or that could become a county issue, whether it's frac sand mining, whether it's ATV ordinances, you name it, one of the things I always try to do is hit the ground or hit the pavement out there, and that's outside of normal county business hours. I'll gladly go to county meetings or other meetings to get that knowledge base, and also to connect with these individuals, because ultimately they're the ones that's going to affect, and they're the ones with the knowledge base. So I try to certainly be respectful and approachable. Be adaptable. Hey, it's Wabasha County. The last 3 years, if you didn't adapt, you probably had some problems around here. Try to be a visionary. I'd like to think that I've thought outside the box, and I'd like to think that the county attorney's office has thought outside the box. I'd like to think that I've made good recommendations to the county board on how to change the status quo in a lot of areas. Ultimately, I'll let you be the decision makers on whether or not I meet that criteria. Positive relationships. You know what, I wouldn't still be here if I didn't really value everybody in this county and the relationships that I've made. Big picture perspective, politically savvy, someone who actively engages in the county and city and rural residents. I think those all tie in with the other leadership qualities. I would be disappointed if I didn't meet each and every one of those criteria.
Maybe this is a Carrie question, I'm not sure. What is our policy on how we internally promote and advertise positions? Because, you know, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing you're not the only qualified person in our staff that could take on the administrator role. And, you know, we've had Judy and Terry, and I'm sure there's other people that probably have some of these same qualities. So where I'm going with this is, was everybody who is qualified, even if they weren't qualified, they, we determine if they're qualified based on our standards that we've laid out. So was everyone offered the same opportunity that Michael was, or was he kind of, I don't want to say handpicked, but I didn't hear that other people, other than you said Judy, declined. So I'm assuming Judy was offered at least the opportunity.
I think I made it pretty clear up front, I'm close
Okay.
to the end, and with social services and public health right now, I
Yeah,
have my place.
exactly. So where I'm going with this, where is our documentation? Because, I'm sure Michael will agree, two of the most important things in HR are that you document everything you do and that you can demonstrate consistency in what you do. Because that's where you get into employment law challenges. And so how can you provide me the documentation that other people were offered the opportunity, just as Michael was, and then how was that gridded out, that Michael rose to the top, that he's the candidate sitting before the board today? Those are very important things. If we had a protected class of people that now, after the fact, would say, gee, I really would have liked to have a shot at that administrator position, but I didn't even know they were going to do it, Where's that documentation? I guess I'm asking, did we dot our i's, we have to be able to demonstrate.
I understand the question, so give me a second, I'll answer it.
Sure.
This is an interim position. The county policy as it relates to filling positions in the county doesn't cover this situation. Secondly, the union contracts are the ones that deal primarily with offering positions internally. I can't speak to the steps that the hiring committee went through, but I'm sure the hiring committee can do that. In discussions with Mr. Plante, informally, I know that there were other internal candidates who were discussed, but honestly, I don't know if those individuals want their names known. I wasn't part of the committee, so I can't answer that part of the question.
Just to be clear, the statute would trump any kind of county policy that we have, and that statute specifically states the county board may appoint as county administrator any county officer or employee deemed to be qualified by reason of training, experience, and administrative qualifications. The county board is well within its rights to appoint somebody as an interim county administrator if it would like. Obviously, I wasn't on the hiring committee during this last process, but I do know that there were other individuals that were considered, and unfortunately, they either weren't interested or apparently the hiring committee wasn't interested. If they want to talk to that, I'll certainly let them do that.
So you were part, because that's what someone asked me, well, didn't Michael sit on the hiring committee? And well, yeah, I mean, a resolution, he was on it, but then.
No, I wasn't by resolution.
On the second one, you weren't?
No.
Okay, all right.
He was just there for the legal
Mhm.
issues if they arose, but he was not
Okay.
part of the committee.
Okay. So,
And I can't swear to this, but I'm picking my brain, and I don't recall any other incumbents applying either the first time or the second time.
and
Now,
what-
correct me if I'm wrong, if others remember, but were there any county staff?
No internal.
There were no internal applications at all.
Nothing, no, when we were going for an interim originally, no, we had no internal people that.
And what was the vehicle you used to advertise or solicit internal candidates?
Well, you have it there in front of you, I think. There was a brochure created, and it
No,
was
for
widely
this interim
distributed.
position.
We did no advertising.
So there was no communication sent to employees, we're looking at filling this internally? Okay.
In our first round of the committee meeting, we addressed internal candidates at that time, and Michael was asked at that time, Deb Koenig was asked at that time, and I'm not sure if you were too, Judy. There were multiple people, and at that time, no one was interested.
And Terry Smith was contacted as well.
Terry Smith, yep. So there was multiple internal candidates that were You know, and there was a application process, and no, we just didn't have any interest. And that, at the time the committee came back, was reinstated, those individuals were solicited again to see if things have changed, and we were fortunate enough to have a different situation with Michael.
My concern is, and it's just based solely on, because I've done this for 20 years, so I know that Title VII, which you're all familiar with, you have to be able to demonstrate that everybody was given an equal opportunity for that position. So if you contacted or handpicked some people and said, are you interested, that's okay, but you couldn't have possibly known who might be interested. So you have to somehow cast your net so that they have the opportunity to apply or to express interest. And it's very possible there was nobody, but if the feds would come in, you have to be able to say, well, here's the email communication we sent out, or here's the posting we had by the time clock where everybody had an opportunity to sign up or express interest in this position. And I know, you're trying to differentiate a little bit between the interim and permanent, but the contract talks about this potentially going permanent. The resolution, I believe, talks about this potentially going permanent. So I think we should treat this like a permanent position because it may be a permanent position.
No, that would be a separate decision on the part of the board. I think you're mistaken about that, Deb. This is an interim position. You're forecasting the future. We have no way of knowing what's going to happen in the future.
And that's clear in the contract as well.
Yeah.
That in October of this year, the board would come back and make that decision. So that it is a two-step decision.
Right, but
And if the board, if the board decides at that point that they want the hiring committee to get back together to
Cast a wider net.
cast a
or
wider
whatever
net and
is
use all the
appropriate,
mechanisms you
that would
use,
be done at the-
then certainly the board would have the ability to do that.
then I guess maybe I don't know why we even talk about the permanency of this position then. I mean, in the contract, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying fact, you're protected in this contract that if this goes permanent, and you get offered the job, and you're not offered the job, you're protected.
So he's protected at his present grade to go back to a position of his present grade. Don't confuse that with being somehow favored for the permanent hire. That they are not the same thing, Deb.
Well, making this a permanent position is addressed in both those things, so that's a possibility. So that's where, let's keep this very narrow.
He
That's
has
what I'm
no
talking about.
inside
If he has
track to a
If he has the
permanent-
possibility of being the permanent administrator.
Well, all of us in this room do, for goodness sakes.
So
We all
then-
have that possibility.
But it does not say in there that we're going to start a whole new hiring process.
It doesn't say we aren't.
And that is correct. There's nothing in the contract that says come October, this board can't vote to reopen the hiring process. Maybe Mr. Plante would apply, maybe he wouldn't, and the board could go through that process. So to look at this contract and say it binds the county in some sort of permanent way is absolutely not correct.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? When Ms. Kelly was speaking of the contract and Mr. Eggenberger of being temporary, let's do a hypothetical. If in October the board decided to do something different for an administrator, would that be considered a termination of Mr. Plante and that position?
As interim county administrator, that position would end, and then he would go to a like pay grade. That's what the
Okay,
contract
but that would not be
is.
considered a termination and a $27,000 golden parachute?
There's two right here.
That's not what is envisioned by the contract.
Okay, but the language is garbled on that. The second part of that, is this a boilerplate contract? And I understand it's negotiated, the things that are in it are negotiated, but, or was this drafted by the county attorney's office?
This was not drafted by the county attorney's office. When I compare this to the contract that the board entered into with Larry Timmerman, it is strikingly similar. Obviously, the pay is not the same, and there are some other differences. Mr. Plante is not going to ask the county to give him a phone, for example, which the county agreed to do with Mr. Timmerman. And the other provisions of the contract, I think, will reflect some of the unique circumstances that have been discussed here today between Mr. Eggenberger and members of the hiring committee. The indemnification clause, again, is almost word for word the same as Mr. Timmerman's, with the exception that it covers Mr. Plante during his course of employment as an assistant county attorney. Again, that's not unusual for any type of contract. The fact that it allows for movement to a like position if this contract ends in October, that is certainly unique to this contract. It wasn't in Mr. Timmerman's contract for obvious reasons.
The sentence that's troubling to me in there is that is in the center of section 9. It says, in the event that Mr. Plante is terminated or the initial contract expires and Mr. Plante is willing and able to perform the duties of county administrator, the county attorney or the county agrees to pay Mr. Plante at the time of receipt of his last paycheck an additional lump sum cash payment in the equal to 4 months aggregate salary. Well, 4 months aggregate salary at the starting rate that he has agreed to accept is roughly $27,000.
But this is the same contract that this board entered into with Mr. Timmerman. That's exactly the same language.
And what that envisions is if I'm terminated as an administrator and I'm not given a position of like where I'm at now here in Wabasha County, then yes, you guys would be terminating that contract. Or the alternative, if you just let this completely lapse and decide not to give me any other position, then yes, I would be expecting some kind of severance. And the reason why I do that is it would be very foolish of me, at least I think it would be foolish, to take this position without some kind of assurance of my future. And what I mean by that is, you know, I'm raising a family in this area. I've got a very nice stable position in the county attorney's office. It's a position that I value greatly. And if I'm going to take a risk to switch positions, that is something that I would leave in my contract.
And for the record, this contract was written by Richard Fersman's firm, and we just used it and entered things that were negotiated with Mr. Plante.
Okay.
So that, I mean, when you talk, was it boilerplate? Well, if you say boilerplate was from one position we offered to this one, then I get, but the original contract was drawn up by Richard.
Okay, but my question for the necessity for that portion of the contract is if he has the option to go back to his original position, which is also defined in the contract, why would we have that payout clause in there if we decide, or he decides that he does, if the contract expires or he's not offered it, the county will pay the money. You know, but he still gets to go back to his other position.
What if the county board decided they wouldn't do that? This is a protection. This is just an added protection.
It is protection. I'll openly admit that. That is exactly why it's in there.
And there was no secret. In my presentation, I mentioned that specifically and said, we felt that was a small price to pay. It is, the intent here, the spirit of it is not to give Michael a severance payment and return him to his current grade. It's an either or.
I found what led me to believe our other topic. I'm going to read a sentence to you, and I'd like you to define it for me. In the event the county board decides to make the interim position a permanent one, comma, the county agrees to retain Mr. Plante as county administrator, and Mr. Plante agrees to continue in the permanent position under the same terms and conditions contained herein. Can you tell me what that means?
The spirit and intent is not that Mr. Plante is automatically entitled to a permanent administrator position. If it were, we wouldn't have all of that other language in there. The spirit and intent, and again, We can line up a lot of lawyers if you wish and see how each one interprets it. But the spirit and intent, and I know this because I was involved in the process, is that Michael will accept the risk of a highly visible, highly contentious position, and he is hopeful that his performance will justify a permanent appointment, but he does not expect that is the case. And if that doesn't happen, that is why it is underpinned with the commitment that we will return him to a position of equal grade. That is it. He either makes it and it goes permanent, or he goes back to his old position, and if neither of those things happens, he's entitled to his severance pay. That is the spirit and intent of that agreement.
Well, we found out that the spirit and intent is well-intentioned people. If it isn't in legal language, when
Okay.
it comes down to contention, spirit and intent means absolutely nothing.
Spirit and intent, and I mean you no disrespect, Ms. Vandenberger, a lot of lawyers have gotten really rich off of spirit and intent. I mean,
A lot of them
Yeah,
in
yeah, I mean,
this county, in
that's-
fact.
that's how it
And I
works.
mean no disrespect to you, but
So,
on matters of employment law, I do have some experience, and spirit and intent is important. I credit Mr. Harms for having tightened this language up, but let's be sure everyone here understands that there was no intention on Michael's part to try to get it both ways.
No, and
There's
no
only
one said
three
that.
possible outcomes. Whatever language you can use to satisfy that, we're really comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope that addresses your concerns.
yeah, and I
That
don't,
addresses my concern.
yeah, I don't think that anyone
Can you
was
restate that, Carrie, so I can, if no one's
I
printed
think
here?
yes, I think if I understood what Mr. Plante was saying, the way he would like that sentence to read is, in the event that Mr. Plante is terminated or the initial contract expires, and Mr. Plante is willing and able to perform the duties of interim county administrator or county administrator, or continue employment in the county in a like pay grade, the county agrees to pay Mr. Plante.
I'm fine with that.
in the event the county board decides to make the interim position a permanent one, can we not then, after that comma, say, a new hiring process will be initiated? Because the way it reads now, and he could apply for that at that point if he wanted to, because it says, the county agrees to retain Mr. Plante as county administrator, and Mr. Plante agrees to continue in the permanent position under the same terms and conditions. So to me, it says, if the board says, let's make this a permanent thing, according to this contract, is in like Flint. And that's what it reads to me, and that's, I mean, it's a very clear sentence, it really, really is.
I'm going to make it very clear as well. The board ultimately in October will be able to decide whether or not it wishes to retain me. As far as changing terms of the contract, I've made a change in here that hopefully makes everybody feel very comfortable. But I feel very comfortable with the way the rest of the contract is written. It's my understanding it's been reviewed by the county attorney's office. It's my understanding it's been reviewed by the hiring committee. It's my understanding that the board of commissioners had an opportunity to send these concerns to the hiring committee, but hasn't done so until now. As far as the rest of the contract is concerned, those are the terms that I would need to feel comfortable in this position.
Initially, you're trying to differentiate between an interim position and a permanent one, but the mixed message now that I'm hearing is, well, it could be permanent, we might save taxpayer dollars and just slide him into this role. So that substantiates my first statement that we need to really make sure that we have followed employment law, that, all potential interested candidates were screened, that we just didn't handpick, because it may not be just for an interim thing, and that's a segue into the handout that I gave. And the first thing, Michael has already talked about it, it's Minnesota Statute 375A.06. This is a state law, and it says the administrator shall be chosen solely on the basis of training, experience, and administrative qualifications, and not be a resident of the county. Next thing, and I you know, our background and experience calls for a bachelor's degree in public administration and business administration. I don't think Michael possesses that, but, you know, he does have some overlap maybe with some legal training. But again, it's not specific to a public administration or a business degree.
To be honest, I think you're being a little bit disingenuous, and I think there's a little bit of a red herring here. The contract's been reviewed, the process has been reviewed by the county attorney's office. The commissioners have been aware of what's been going on. The county went through an exhaustive process in the last time it filled the position. At that time, I was even contacted for the position, and I assume that they knew my credentials at that point as well, and that I probably would have been vetted by Mr. Fursman had they to even be comfortable in offering that position. I don't know that because I certainly didn't do Richard's job for him. But, I think we've hit this with a hammer about 16 different times. I can tell you that your next resolution says the goal of Wabasha County, whenever it looks to hire an employee, is to find the most qualified person. The county certainly did that. They went through a process, it spent some money to do that, they interviewed a number of individuals. Unfortunately, not all the commissioners were able to make all of those interviews or to participate in the entire process, but the county certainly did that. I'm representing to you that I believe that I'm a qualified, experienced individual to fill the position. Ultimately, it's going to be a county board decision on whether or not they really feel that I am that person. That's certainly why we're here. I think we've had a lot of discussion on that, and I'm certainly willing to have more. But just if there's anything else that I can present, I'm certainly willing to do that.
If you want to just finish with your handouts, and
Yeah,
then so we
yeah.
can move forward.
The resolution also says that the Wabasha County Board, this is one we passed in 2013, the Wabasha County Board shall develop a process to identify a qualified, experienced individual to fill. I have not been provided the process, you know, what process, that was the point I was making earlier, what process did we go through to make sure that we identified the most qualified, experienced candidate if there are potentially people here that didn't have the opportunity. The next several pages come from the Wabasha County Government Study Commission final report, and just snippets from there, but their focus really was on HR, talking about the complex issues and significant liability. It talks about the administrator, again, having human resource skills and experience. It's page 20 of the government study final report. It says, the county coordinator nor the county board have the appropriate training and experience in public administration and human resource to manage county government. This fact increases the county's exposure to liability. Page 22 of their report talks about professional management is an essential component of effective county government. You know, Michael has classroom experience. He doesn't have sitting behind the big desk experience. And that's part of being a professional manager. And again, the human resources element. Page 33, by contrast, Minnesota statute provides that county administrators have supervisory responsibility over all department heads. I think it'll be a challenge for you, Michael, that you've worked basically as an equal or maybe a subordinate to the department heads because you weren't a department head, and now you're going to be their boss. So, you know, I'm sure you've probably thought about it. It could be kind of a sticky wicket for you. I hope that you've thought that through. Again, the contrast, we abolished the administrator position, and the administrative position requires a degree in public administration plus at least 8 years of public administration experience. So those were just kind of some things that I wanted to share with the board, not to be disrespectful, but just to point out that, state law addresses this, EEOC addresses this, especially if you're Title VII. If we have not had a transparent process and haven't documented how we got to this point, there is a possibility that there could be Title VII challenges across the county, and I don't want that to happen. I don't think that would be good, but it's a possibility, and I just want the board to consider that. And I think if we leave it as a interim position and don't talk about making it permanent, we might have some wiggle room there because it's not a permanent position. If you do include the language that could just kind of roll into a permanent position, I think we're on the hook for a little bit more liability than maybe we want to be for that. And just made me think of something. In the first hiring process, you didn't want to be in the applicant pool with Richard?
At that time, I had some personal reasons on why I did not agree to do an interim or to apply for the position.
Okay.
I just want to thank you, Deb, too, for bringing and highlighting the great work that the Government Study Commission did and the tireless amount of energy they put into that.
Absolutely.
And the spirit and the intent was nice to have Mr. Eggenberger on our committee because he had the wherewithal and was at the meetings to know what the spirit and the intent of the Government Study Commission was. So he lended a great
Absolutely.
insight into what
Absolutely.
hard work that the Government Study Commission did provide the county.
And that's what makes government good, is when you have a collective group of people working together from all walks of life and all of backgrounds and experiences. And so that's what makes good government. And so, thank you for everything that you've done. I think it's
Commissioner Wabi and Commissioner Hall, do you have anything to say?
Well, I just have
time
a-
constraints here.
Yeah, the part of this that Commissioner Rush, you underlined here on page 20 about the county coordinator, the county board has the appropriate training and experience in public administration, human resources to manage county government. This fact increases the county's exposure to liability. The first thing that came to my mind is our current department heads and staff, attorney's office, including Mr. Plante here, have been doing this for the last 2 years and 1 month. I mean, realistically. So, I mean, to me, that's a heck of a jump start. So, that's all I got to say right now.
He's had the experience over the last couple of years. He's done a lot of the work for us already. There's no reason why he can't handle the job. I guess time will tell if his skin is thick enough for it.
Mr. Chair, just a couple more thoughts, if I could. Michael, and I know Mr. Eggenberger talked about it too. I heard words about unusual personalities, the thick skin, know what you were dealing with. Michael, you said that a couple of times. I know what we're dealing with here. You used the word divisiveness. You said staff know what's going on here. You talked a lot about trust. So what is going on here? I mean, what assurances, Michael, can you provide the board that you will be a trust, that you can trust us and we can trust you, vice versa? How you will deal with unusual personalities. You know what you are dealing with, although nobody's identified what is being dealt with. The divisiveness, things like that. What's your, I mean, you've thought about this, obviously. You wouldn't have thrown your hat in the ring if you didn't feel, I have an approach or I have a plan that can accomplish just what Mr. Eggenberger was talking about, moving on, moving forward. How do you do that, Michael? We talked about that with the other administrator candidates in the Larry Timmerman pool. What's your plan to move forward, to bring unity, those types of things?
Sure.
What's your plan?
You know what, one of the things I can commend all the commissioners on is that you all have a drive for your own specific issues. There are certain things that are near and dear to your heart. One of the things I'm hoping to do is to focus that energy. Ms. Rushin, at the last board meeting, you were appointed to the negotiation committee. And part of the reason why I made that suggestion is I know that you have good ideas on that. In fact, I go as far to say is when you put your mind to something, you tend to get results. So that's something that I would certainly try to do on this county board, is to try to highlight what each of you are good at and try to have your attention directed there. And this is going to sound cheesy, but I think there are some big picture items in the future that we can possibly address as a county board that should hopefully gain some unanimous consent on that. If you're asking for specific examples, at this point I'm not able to give them to you. But what I'm hoping to do are to find issues that you guys can coalesce around and come together on and hopefully build some camaraderie. Are there going to be issues that are going to be 3-2 that unfortunately that we've had in the past? Absolutely. The best that I can do on that is tell you that I'm going to give each of you a fair chance. If you confide in me in in which direction you'd like to go or work you'd like to have done, I'm going to do that for you. But ultimately, the board's got to understand that it is a majority rule. It's a democracy. That's what we have in this country. That's what we have in this county. If it's going to be a 3-2 vote and I have to do work on it, there might be some hard feelings with some of those individuals, whether it's Commissioner Wabi and Haller that are in the minority and I have to do with the three of you bid. That's the way it is. But I can tell you this, I'm more than willing to listen to all sides of an argument. I'm more than willing to chip in if I think a particular point of view has merit. That's the best I can do. The only assurance I can give you is you guys have been working with me for 3 years, some of you even longer maybe. You know what you're getting. I don't think there's really anything else I can tell you up here that's going to sway your vote one way or another. You know what you're getting.
I agree, and I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the public's comments, and I think in the matter of time, we should move this forward. We do have a motion by Commissioner Wabi and a second by myself. Do we have any further discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Can you do a roll call? I did not hear everybody, sorry.
Commissioner Harms?
I said aye.
Okay, Commissioner
I
Rushing?
abstain. I don't have enough information to make this.
Springer's aye.
Aye.
Wabi's
Aye.
All is aye.
In a roll call,
Pass.
can I make one quick comment?
Sure.
In the interest of trying to get unity on this board, I don't agree with the process that was, all of the process that was used to get to this point, but in the interest of promoting unity on this board, I will support it.
And we appreciate that, Dave. Do we have a 10-minute recess? Is that all right? Sure can. Come back at